The HOA president called the police on my vineyard. 6 minutes later, she realized I owned the entire valley, and that's when her perfect little empire started to crumble. I'll never forget the look on her face when the cops she summoned turned around and slapped handcuffs on her husband instead. But before we get there, let me take you back to where this whole nightmare began, because it didn't start with cops or federal charges. It started with a fence. My name's Marcus Thornfield. A few years ago, I was a high-priced corporate lawyer in San Francisco, custom suits corner office billing $400 an hour. And then my life exploded. My marriage collapsed after my wife chose my law partner over me, the divorce cleaned me out, and I found myself broke, holding nothing but the deed to my grandfather's 40-acre vineyard in Solstice Valley. So I packed up what was left of my pride and moved into a creaky farmhouse where the floorboards groaned like they'd seen too much. The vineyard was old, run down, and needed more love than I had energy for, but it was mine. For the first time in years, waking up at 5 a.m. to dew-covered grape leaves and the bark of my German shepherd felt like therapy. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild a life here. But then she arrived. Enter Delilah Hartwell. Picture every Karen stereotype you've ever seen, but with a law degree, a political chip on her shoulder, and a husband who builds soulless McMansions for a living. Delilah was the self-appointed queen of Solstice Heights, the HOA that popped up 3 years ago like mold in a damp basement. She rolled up to my property in her white Escalade hair lacquered into submission, clipboard in hand, and said, "My new fence violated aesthetic standards." I laughed and told her my family had been here since the 60s, long before her HOA even existed. She sneered, tossed her perfect hair, and hissed, "Rules are rules, honey. We have standards." 2 days later, I got a certified letter. Cease and desist. $500 a day in fines. Copies sent to my bank, the county, even the local newspaper. That's when I realized this wasn't just some neighborly spat. This was war. At first, I fought it with logic. 15 years as a real estate lawyer meant I knew the game. I dug through my grandfather's dusty files and found gold perpetual farming rights written into the deed in 1962. That meant her HOA didn't mean a damn thing. I thought I had her cornered. But Delilah wasn't just petty, she was ruthless. Within weeks, she filed complaints with the county, smeared me in front of neighbors, and plastered Facebook with horror stories about my unsafe vineyard. Suddenly, old friends wouldn't wave. The hardware store clerk ignored me, even the bank stalled my loans. Walking into town felt like walking into a wall of cold stares. And late at night, alone at my kitchen table, I started to wonder if she was right. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I should sell, cut my losses, disappear. I'll admit it, I broke. For one long night, I stared at those letters, convinced I'd lost before I even began. But then I thought about my grandfather, about the decades he poured into this land, and about how Delilah smirked like she'd already won. That's what lit the fire again. I wasn't just some farmer. I was a lawyer, and I wasn't going down easy. I called Jake Morrison, an old law school buddy who specialized in environmental law. Together we dug deeper, and that's when we uncovered the real game. Her husband Preston had been buying farmland, rezoning it, flipping it into subdivisions, and raking in millions. My 40 acres were the last piece of the puzzle. If they could drive me out, they'd cash out big. It wasn't about fences, it was about greed. That's when the story flipped. A surveyor confirmed my land actually stretched under several HOA homes' property they thought they owned. And buried in the courthouse files misfiled for decades was the real bombshell: Solstice Valley had been declared a historic agricultural district back in 1987. Every one of Preston's developments was technically illegal. Every single house could be condemned. Suddenly the bully with the clipboard looked like a fraud with everything to lose. I wasn't alone anymore either. Jake assembled the legal muscle. Dr. Sarah Bennett, a soil scientist, gathered environmental evidence. Father Miguel, a local priest, rallied farm families who'd been bullied just like me. Together we formed an alliance, neighbors with nothing left to lose, finally standing up to the machine. Delilah sensed her grip slipping, so she doubled down. She had someone cut my irrigation lines, thousands of gallons of water flooding my best vines. Clients got anonymous calls warning them my vineyard was contaminated. Fake reviews popped up online claiming my wine poisoned guests. And the police started showing up after bogus reports that I was threatening neighbors. Each stunt cut deeper. I lost money, sleep, and at times hope. But every act of sabotage only gave us more evidence. We documented it all, and Jake sent it straight to federal investigators. Then came the final showdown. The HOA announced a mediation meeting at the town hall to resolve community concerns. What Delilah didn't know was that the state attorney general, the FBI, and the local news had all been looped in. The room was packed, neighbors, reporters, even cameras rolling. Delilah strutted in wearing her most expensive suit, Preston flanked by two high-powered attorneys. They smiled like predators about to pounce. Delilah went first, wagging her finger, accusing me of destroying property values and disrespecting community standards. She waved petitions with identical signatures, calling me a danger to the neighborhood. Preston followed, pretending to be the reasonable one, offering to buy me out for fair market value. The crowd nodded politely. And then it was my turn. I stood up, slowly, pulled out a folder thicker than a Bible, and started laying out the facts. The 1962 deed, the agricultural exemption, the survey showing their homes built on my land, the environmental violations, the fraudulent permits. Each page I laid down was like a hammer strike. And then I dropped the nuclear bomb, federal evidence of wire fraud, mail fraud, environmental crimes, and racketeering. The room erupted in gasps. Preston's face went pale. Delilah's smile cracked into panic. And right on cue, the doors swung open. FBI agents walked in, badges shining under the fluorescent lights. The whispers turned into a roar as the agents headed straight for Preston. Delilah shrieked, pointing at me, screaming it was a setup. But the click of handcuffs silenced her faster than any gavel. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and the whole valley watched their self-appointed rulers dragged away in disgrace. That's where it ended for me. Not with champagne, not with a party, but with the sight of justice walking a man in a $1,000 suit out the door in cuffs while his wife screamed into the void. I just stood there, breathing, finally free of the weight they'd tried to bury me under. And if there's one thing I learned through it all, it's this: bullies only win when you let them.